What's up, guys? It's Spoonie. This video originally was just going to be a review for the Japanese version of the Resident Evil 3 remake. But lately there's been talk about the series' future, specifically number 9, and so I decided I just want to talk about kind of the franchise as a whole. This game specifically, but also, other games in the series. So first of all, this is the Japanese version. Um, The big difference between the Japanese and the rest of the world versions of the last few Resident Evil games is the Japanese version is toned down for violence. Like what I mean, an example of that is if any of you have played Resident Evil 7 Biohazard or Biohazard 7 Resident Evil, the Japanese version. There's a scene earlier on where you're stuck in the house and this police sheriff comes to help you. Anyways, he gets attacked by Jed, or whatever the patriarch of that family is, and he gets disfigured in a way that the Japanese don't like to have in their media. As I understand it, they have a particular issue with, I think, the mutilation of bodies and especially like the destruction of heads and faces. The guy gets his head cut in half with a shovel. So in the Japanese version, which they called the Grotesque Edition, it he still gets attacked that way, but the part of his head doesn't fly off. And likewise, there's another scene in the game where your character actually gets their hand cut off. And in the Japanese version, it shows that, but your hand is still there. Again, this has something to do with their censorship laws over mutilation. Now, both this and the Resi 2 remake were digital-only titles for Xbox, at least in Japan. Now, Japan actually uses credit cards as a way of doing age verification. So, the only way to prove that you're 18 plus to buy a mature rated game in Japan is to have a credit card, which you can only get from a Japanese bank, which you can only open an account with if you live in Japan. Now, I was lucky enough to have a friend who gifted me a copy of the Resident Evil 2, the Japanese remake, but for the other games, they are available on Game Pass if you happen to live in the Japanese region. And yeah, I liked this game enough to to use the achievements as an excuse to play through the game a bunch of more times. Now, seeing as how I already played through this game, the Western version, I pretty much knew exactly what to do, but I still enjoy. I did like a playthrough on every difficulty just because I like the gameplay in this. Obviously, the Resident Evil 2 is a better game. This definitely feels a lot more lacking in content in comparison, but the experience is still really good, and like I said, it was enough for me to play through the Japanese version. Just a little background on the run you're seeing here. So again, it is the Inferno run, the hardest difficulty, and I got an S rank on it. Took me a little bit more than an hour, and honestly, there were some dumb mistakes I made. I forgot for the first little while that you can skip the conversations. So my character was walking slower because you're supposed to be engaged in this dialogue. I did get caught by, and I knew the zombie was there, I thought I had more time to react. In the medical facility in the underground part, I got turned around a little bit in the hospital and just some other less than graceful movements. I also saved only one time, and that was at the checkpoint right before the final boss. And the only reason I did that is because sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the tentacles of Nemesis, and I didn't want to have to start another hour-long playthrough. So like I was saying, the Japanese versions of the last few games are censored and actually tamer in terms of violence than every other version released around the world. So starting with RE7, then to the Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, Resident Evil 8 Village, and presumably the upcoming Resident Evil 9 Apocalypse will also be the same way, where the violence is toned down and there's a Japanese exclusive version. Now, I played the English version of this not too long ago, and I don't really remember there being any significant difference at all in this game compared to the American release. Like I said, with Resident Evil 7, you had parts where guy's head getting cut in half or his hand getting cut off. Those have been censored. The actions still take place. You just don't see the same level of destruction, I guess. And I know that in Resident Evil 2, the only thing I noticed was early on in the game when you get to the police station, as you're starting to explore, there's a part where I think there's like a guard who's trying to crawl out, or somebody trying to crawl out from under a metal door that's only open a crack so he could get underneath. And he's like ripped in half by zombies. In the Japanese version, they don't show the ripped in half body. It's just a full body. Now, I haven't played the Japanese Resident Evil 8 Village, so I couldn't tell you what the differences are in that and the Western version. But I don't recall there being anything too graphic or grotesque in the Western versions. I loved Village, so I'm gonna see if I can't get my hands on a copy of the Japanese version at some point. I also forgot to mention, regards to these games, even the Japanese version, I think the default language is dialogue is English, and the default subtitles are also in English. They do have full Japanese dubbing, voice work. One of my playthroughs I did with the Japanese, and it was pretty good. I suppose I've got no real way of judging the voice acting quality because I don't play enough games with Japanese dialogue on, but it seemed to match the tone of what was going on. So if you can't tell by now, I really love this franchise. I've been playing Resident Evil since the first one came out on the PlayStation. My friend actually beat it before I did, so I got to watch the game ending that way before I eventually got around to doing it myself. Now, when Resident Evil 2 first came out, that was a huge game changer. I mean, you had new characters, obviously a new setting. There were some new weapons, new zombie types. It was just everything the first one was, but better. And the original Resident Evil 3, I honestly don't have very many memories of. I spent a lot more time playing Resident Evil 2. I played the PlayStation version. I played the N64 version. Did it come out on the Dreamcast? I know they got Code Veronica, and I played that. But Resident Evil 3, I know that some people were disappointed with the remake because the clock tower sequence was apparently a lot better in the original PlayStation version. In this one, it's just Nemesis is chasing you through a burning building, and there's a lot of like quick time event type things where you just have to run away from him. It's my understanding that the original code or something for the original Resident Evil 3 is lost, and they can't just like make a copy of the game burning an image or something like that. So apparently the game is just lost to time. I wouldn't mind seeing them port over the original versions of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, but who knows if we'll ever see that. And the remakes they've put out for all three of them are definitely better all around. Now, I did have a GameCube, but for some reason I just never got around to Resident Evil 4. Obviously, I felt the DNA of that in pretty much every action game that came out afterwards, like Gears of War and other things like that. And so I did have an Xbox 360. I did play Resident Evil 5 on there. I think I got the full original 1000. I didn't touch the DLC. I think I sold the game by the time that came out. I personally didn't mind the co-op aspect of it. Having played Resident Evil 4 since, after playing 5, I can definitely appreciate that in Resident Evil 5, the CPU guy that's following you around can at least do something. Even though the computer Shiva is not very useful, at least she can fetch ammo for you. Now, Resident Evil 6 is something I was kind of had stepped away from gaming at the time. I wasn't playing very many games when it came out, and
This must be the
when I
secret
sort of
breach
came back to
office.
gaming, I
Nothing.
heard nothing but terrible things about it. I've watched a few like documentaries on YouTube, like about the history of Resident Evil and stuff, and that segment of the lore always seems really confusing. I've heard there's like 6 playable characters and like 3 or 4 different storylines going on at once. And yeah, I can understand why that would probably be a little too much. But I did get the remake, or sorry, the remastered version on the Xbox, and I will get around to playing that at some point. As for Resident Evil 7, I own the game. I beat the game to the full 1000, the original 1000 or Platinum Trophy. I did not bother getting any of the DLC because it just did not seem interesting to me. Although that last piece, the End of Zoe or whatever, that came out after I had sort of stopped paying attention to Part 7. So perhaps that'll give me an excuse to go back to that game someday.
Gotta put this out.
Now, for Resident Evil 8, I love that game. It is a little more open. It has the feeling of more openness than some of the other games, but that's only because rather than looking at, walls in a ceiling, you're looking at a skybox. So it looks like it's really open.
Is someone in here?
I like the pivoting that we started to see in Resident Evil 7 with the molded, and here with the lichens and some of the other creatures, Lady Dimitrescu or whatever her name is. Um, that they're starting to pivot away from like all this zombie stuff into exploring more concepts for this progenitor virus and the different offshoots of it, the T virus, the Code Veronica virus, the G virus. The bosses in Village are definitely probably some of the best in the series. It's not just, oh, fire, you fight them off and then somebody will throw you a rocket launcher and you blow them up. I mean, that still does kind of happen because that's a Resident Evil standard at this point. But like when you're fighting Lady Dimitrescu or whatever her name is, versus when you're fighting what's that guy who fights in the giant mech and you have that stupid car towards the end of the game. Just a little bit of a change up to a lot of the stuff we'd seen in Resident Evil up to that point. The bosses in number 7, I didn't think were anything special. I enjoyed the boss encounters, don't get me wrong, but I didn't. I thought they were pretty simplistic. For instance, I like
Smells like.
the fact that you again, what's that guy? Oh, Jack. The guy's name is Jack, the father in 7, and you have the chainsaw battle with him in the basement, and that was interesting because it's such a small little arena that you're in, and you've got these things, these hanging bodies that you can like kick at him to slow him down, but eventually he'll get pissed off and cut them down, so then you really got nothing standing in between you unless you've beaten the game and gotten that little buzzsaw weapon, in which case you can just melt him in like 5 seconds. And when you fight his wife, Marguerite, in that house where she's like got all those flies and bugs and stuff, that battle is really more annoying than anything. Just because she keeps jumping into the walls and skittering around and popping out somewhere else. And it can, if you aren't lucky, it can take you a couple minutes longer than it should just because when you really start to lay into her, she wants to run and hide. Village also leaves the series, the ending anyways, not the DLC ending. The main game ending leaves the series in kind of an interesting place. Sort of spoilers for the game that's been out for a few years now. In Resident Evil 8, you find out that your character actually died at the very beginning of Resident Evil 7.
Here we go.
Basically, you are a giant collection of mold, like the molded from Resident Evil 7 and stuff like that. But you've maintained the personality and appearance of this Ethan Winters character. So in Resident Evil 8, you kind of, that truth is revealed to you that you're not real, that you're just this like clone piece of mold. and the character dies. But then at the ending of the game, when you see you see his grown-up daughter, it looks he's in the background or something off in the distance as she gets in the car and they start driving. So I haven't heard anything about number 9, which is supposed to be called Resident Evil Apocalypse. And much like how in Resident Evil 7 they used the letters to get the VII, like in Evil, because the 7th game, Village, they did the same thing with an 8, Roman numerals. And in Apocalypse, they're doing 9 with the Y is kind of like faintly an X. So it's Resident Evil 9 Apocalypse. I don't know anything about the story in that. I've tried to avoid spoilers for these games. And I don't know if Ethan is coming back, or if maybe we're going to get to play as Chris or one of the other sort of central figures again. Now, as of me recording this video, there is a rumor going around that Resident Evil 9 is going to be an open world game. I don't really know how to feel about that. Like I said, 8 it's definitely more open than the others. And honestly, I wouldn't mind to see that for 9. They're closed off areas, but with the appearance of it being like open. But if you scour around the perimeter, you can clearly see there's like fences you can't jump and invisible walls and stuff. So I like the idea of it being more open, like Village was, but only if it's in service of the story. It would be wild to. I mean, I guess with Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, we kind of got that. But it would have been really fun to sort of wander around the city in Raccoon City in the Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 timeline. Have that be a little more open so you can explore different stuff. I guess that would have to be more of like a side story with other characters you introduce. There's so many characters in the Resident Evil universe, and a lot of them have not been seen beyond outside of one
Carlos,
game in
chill.
particular.
Restored power to the subway.
Resident Evil Zero, you had that guy Billy, who was he was accused of committing a crime or something like that, and then at the end of the game, Rebecca Chambers lets him go, pretends that he died in the attack or whatever, but he's still out there. Resident Evil 3 had Carlos. Again, he's still out there somewhere. Resident Evil 5 had Shiva Alomar. She's still out there somewhere. It would be nice to see these characters followed up on. To I can't remember at this point if the BSAA is good or not. I think they're bad. I think in Village we found out that they're cloning Chris Redfield using some kind of Nemesis archetype or something. And then there's Blue Umbrella, which is supposed to be built from the remnants of Umbrella, but they're trying to undo all the biocatastrophes that the original Umbrella did. And speaking of Umbrella, in Village, you may have heard, they explore the origins of the Umbrella Corporation. They don't really. There's an optional collectible you can find. It's a little note, or a letter, I should say, written by Oswald Spencer, who's one of the 3 main architects of the Umbrella Corporation. He wrote because he was talking about how he was fascinated by the genetic research that was going on in the village, but that he discovered this progenitor flower and that he was going to sort of take his research in a new direction. But he was really grateful for all the time he spent there learning about genetics and stuff. And the umbrella symbol apparently resembles the coat of arms for that village, like the 4 main houses, the founding fathers or
Okay,
whatever
give me a
of the
sec.
village. So, I mean, that's
Alright,
kind of
where are we headed?
disappointing. I thought there'd be, I don't know, a cooler explanation than just, yeah, this is symbol on a cave wall or something.
Hey, I'm Super Cop.
Now, I like those animated, the CG animated Resident Evil movies. I believe
Carlos,
that those
I
are
finished the
supposed to be
mission.
in continuity, although I don't recall exactly how they all fit together in terms of what order. Um, the animation on those is pretty good. I think I like the first one the most, where there's the it starts with the terrorist attack at the airport, where zombies on the plane, and then they go into the underground facility area, and I don't remember the second one very well. I think the third one is with Leon, and they're in Europe, and they're fighting off like a bunch of nemesis. There was a more recent movie which I haven't seen, and then there was also like it was like a 5 or 6 episode miniseries which I also haven't seen. I would like to see both of those. I just have not made it a priority to track those down yet. If you guys have seen them, let me know whether it's something I should get on or not. Like I said, I've watched videos in the past here on YouTube of people trying to sort of stitch together a timeline for Resident Evil. It's not always the easiest because games like, say, Resident Evil 2, there are different sort of storylines you can go through where um, Chris is the main character and Jill is the supporting character, or you can go through where Jill is the main character and Chris is the supporting character, but then there's an A path and a B path, so those play out differently. So there's not necessarily a definitive answer to exactly what happened during these games. Like overall, yes, the characters survive, but in terms of who does what when, that's kind of open to interpretation. So there are some videos out there that try to put it together, but it's kind of daunting to watch them because you don't realize how many games are in this series. Um, they had a Game Boy Color edition, Resident Evil Gaiden, I think it was called. There were a number of PS2 light gun style games where you're on rails and you just got to shoot things that come at you, like House of the Dead. I think they were the Umbrella Chronicles and the Nightmare Chronicles. That's something I wouldn't mind seeing they sort of port to newer systems. It's my understanding that it kind of each game went through like kind of the storylines and the major story points of the first few games. So even though the continuity might have changed and it might be confusing, I'd still like to go through it. But aside from all those games, like I said, there's stuff that rarely gets talked about. Um, there have been a number of actual like theater productions in Japan, and these apparently are in canon. You can, if you look it up on YouTube, you can watch them. I think they're like an hour or an hour and a half or something like that each. Um, it's like it stars Rebecca Chambers as she's at some university and some outbreak happens, and because she was part of Stars and she was in the she's been around for Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. She kind of has an idea of what this is, and it's really just crazy how much transmedia stuff there is, and trying to figure out what works or what doesn't. I mean, the one thing that definitely is not tied to anything else are the live action movies. Now, the most recent one that came out, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, I liked it. It was not a good movie. Um, there were a couple characters that I thought the actors were a little weird. Like, no offense to the guy that played Wesker, I think I would have tried to find somebody else. And I feel like the worst thing about that movie is just they were trying to cram too much stuff in there. Um, Lisa Trevor is a, kind of an obscure aspect of the Resident Evil lore. So the fact that the movie starts off with her, that was unexpected. It was nice. I thought that was cool. But then they just tried to jam. There's so many characters. They had Chris and Jill, and Claire and Leon, and um, obviously Wesker was there, and I think Barry was there. Like, there's just too many characters trying to do too much stuff at once. In that regard, the were there 5 or 6 of the original the Mila Jovovich movies? Those kind of worked out better, just from the standpoint of the pacing was better because there were multiple films. Now, I do have a soft spot for the second movie, Resident Evil Apocalypse, because that did shoot in my old neighborhood, around where I lived in Toronto. Um, so lots of recognizable landmarks and stuff for me. So it's always fun for me to watch that one. Anyways, I actually thought the very first Resident Evil movie was pretty good for what it was. Obviously, that scene with the Red Queen in the laser hallway is just memorable in general. And the second movie, like I said, I liked a lot, also because they're adapting the Resident Evil 2 and 3 storyline. But starting with 3, where like the world has been nuked and it's a desert, and then there's clones of Alice on some tanker ship somewhere in like number 5. And then I think in number 6, a bunch of characters come back from the other movies, but you find out they're all clones, part of this. The movies don't end up in a good place. I'll just say that. I mean, it's a headache trying to think about it. Yeah, basically, the main character is a clone. Everybody's a clone at the end of the series. That's all you need to know. My favorite of those live action movies is probably still always going to be the first one, though. Just because it felt the closest to the game, and it had sort of the least amount of ridiculous stuff going on. Like starting in part 2 when Alice awakens and she starts doing all these like flying kicks and shit, and it's just a little over the top for me. I mean, I know she's supposed to be some kind of hybrid zombie clone, like just I actually like the simplicity of Welcome to Raccoon City. It's the only movie in the series. It's probably going to be the only one, but that means it's never going to get even more convoluted than it already is. And as far as my favorite game in the series goes, that is a little more difficult to answer. Like I mentioned, I haven't played Resident Evil 6 yet. I've barely touched those. I forget what the spin-offs were. One of them was free to play for the first chapter, and then you had to buy the next couple chapters. I think they were called like Revelations or something. And I also haven't played the last game out, which was the Resident Evil 4 remake. I don't think the storyline is going to substantially change between that and the original RE4. In the gameplay, it looks similar to the 2 and 3 remakes, which I really enjoy. But that whole thing of having to babysit Ashley, that was annoying as hell in the original version. And to see that it's still in this version does not give me the most excitement to look forward to playing the game. If I was forced, though, to pick from the games that I have played,
All right.
I'm probably gonna say Part 7, because the re-engine that they created for that game that they've since used in the remake for 2, 3, and 4, I think is awesome. I would like to see it incorporated into other types of games and stuff like that. You know, everybody's always clamoring for them to bring back Dino Crisis. I would love to see it with this engine. Maybe Onimusha, or really any of their PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era properties that they seemingly left to die. Oh god, and I forgot about the multiplayer Resident Evil games. I did kind of mention Operation Raccoon City earlier. That was definitely a 7th generation game, a 360 or PS3 era game. It was designed for 4-player co-op. It's a cover-based shooter. It just screams of that generation of gaming. The storyline is set kind of around the events of Resident Evil 2. You're playing a team that's sent in to kind of help extract people and eliminate zombies and stuff. Resident Evil 2 Remake came with something called, I think it was Resistance, and I barely touched that. I think I just played it to unlock one achievement just so I could have it on my card. And then Resident Evil 3 came with, or sorry, Resident Evil Village came with Resistance, and then Resident Evil 2 or 3 came with, there was some other one that again starts with RE. They did not. Same thing. I played it just to get an achievement, so it'd be on my gamer card. But I did not like the format that they chose for that type of online. I actually thought Operation Raccoon City was better. The reason being that Operation Raccoon City or Orc, um, it felt like a Resident Evil game. You were directly interacting with characters and settings from the mainline series. These like Resistance and the other multiplayer game, you're playing like OCs. You're playing original characters that have really no, that I'm aware of, no any kind of ties or standing in the Resident Evil lore. And they kind of feel like the generic survivors you can play as in the Dead by Daylight game. And speaking of which, Dead by Daylight actually had, I think, two different Resident Evil DLC packs. The first one lets you play as Nemesis and gives you, I think, Chris and Jill. And then the second pack, you're playing as, I think, a Tyrant. And, or no, sorry, the other pack, Wesker is the killer. And then I forget who the main characters are, the two heroes you get for that one, they're survivors or whatever they call them. Um, I stay away from that game. I tried to play it on Game Pass. I didn't like the progression system, the skill trees, the perks, all that stuff, and I didn't find it fun. And what I found out is that it's not a lot of fun because the game is full of no-lifers that love to stomp on new players. And so it's really hard to get into a game like that. The closest thing you'll find to a Resident Evil experience, at least in sort of modern gaming, is a series called The Evil Within. There's two of them. The game's actually known as Psycho Break in Japan, and it was created by Shinji Mikami, and this guy is a legend in gaming. Specifically, he had a hand in directing the very first Resident Evil, Resident Evil 4, which was a big tonal shift in terms of gameplay, taking it a little more into an action territory. He also did the aforementioned Dino Crisis. I believe he worked on Mega Man. The guy's just been a legend at Capcom. He left, he formed his own studio called Tango Gameworks, which was bought by ZeniMax, which was bought by Microsoft. He's since left the company. But I tried to play the first game, and honestly, I couldn't get very far into it. It was a little too intense for me at the time. I've been thinking about getting back into horror games lately. I don't really count this as horror. I know it's survival horror, but especially these remakes of Resident Evil are definitely more sort of action-based. But I've been thinking about getting back into some horror
Carlos,
gaming.
I know we didn't get off
I
topic.
tried to play Chernobyl the Swan.
Hey,
I think it was
you
last
saved my
year,
ass first.
and it
Hell of a lot
creeped
braver
me
than
out
me.
a little too much just because of where my head was at the
What
time.
matters is that we can get
But
everyone
I've
to
been
the
watching a
subway.
lot of Giallo films on
You'll be safe.
Tubi, and I'm really getting into that stuff. I just found out, I know they're not
What about
new,
you?
they're new to me,
From the sound of
of
it,
a
you won't be catching
publisher,
the train.
developer,
Why
and he
not?
goes by the name Puppet
I'll follow
Combo.
orders.
It's a one-man
If it means I can
development
help save the
team
city,
who puts out a lot of
why not?
stuff. And recently, or not recently, but not too long ago, formed a distribution group called Torture Star Video, with which he uses to help promote other game developers that have a similar bent to him. And his specialty is making like low res
All right.
PS1
Keep your head screwed
graphic
on nothing
games.
else. This is the place to
They
be.
are very
You sure?
minimal, but
Looks
apparently
like the
they
synagogue to me.
make really effective use of music and stuff like that. And I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about them. And so I picked up a couple of them, and I will get around to playing them at some point. If you guys have any interest, I can. That's something maybe I can put up a gameplay video or something, or just do a review.
Leave him! Come on!
Um, the ones that I have, I got all the ones that are on Xbox that have achievements.
Where'd that cop go?
There are a couple, I think, Night at the Gates of
No,
Hell, Christmas Massacre, and Nun
okay.
Massacre
We got a job
are
to do.
available on Xbox, but They don't have achievements. There's something to do with the approval process. So they ended up, or he ended up, Puppet Combo put the games out through the Xbox Creator Program. So it spotlights kind of indie developers and stuff. The only thing is there's no achievements tied to those games. But this is something that I am not caring about so much anymore. Like I've mentioned in the past, I play games, and I definitely am an achievement hunter. If I'm playing a game, I want to try to get everything, unlock everything, complete 100%, unless it's really grindy or has a ton of like online multiplayer stuff. I realize that I might be veering a little off of Resident Evil right now, but the fact is, Resident Evil and Silent Hill on the PlayStation 1 do seem to be significant sources of inspiration for these Puppet Combo games. And yeah, it's without one, you couldn't have the other. There's also a game series inspired by Resident Evil, and it goes by the name of Outbreak. Now, I don't know much about the series. There's like 20 games in total, and I have no idea where to start. And they look like they range in quality from like, I think the first one or two were like 2D, over the top isometric view or something. And then the rest have turned into more of a three-dimensional Resident Evil clone. And that studio actually has also started putting out, what do they call it, Dino Break. It's a Dino Crisis clone. Now, Resident Evil has inspired a ton of games out there, not just the ones I've mentioned. So I'm wondering, going forward, where can the series go? Because it started off as survival horror. There really was an element of tension in terms of, you know, when using the items, knowing when to use your healing herbs, when you can just run past the zombies, when that should be the option, so you can save ammo for the boss. It was there was a lot more than just playing the game. There was this whole item management system that you had to try to contend with. One of the scariest games I've ever played that makes the best use of fear and atmosphere was the Outlast series, or rather, I should say Outlast 1. I never played the DLC, and I haven't played Outlast 2, though I hear it's good. The reason that these were so good at creating a real sense of dread in the player, again, not just the atmosphere and the environment. The first Outlast, you were a reporter who was sent into an insane asylum because you were trying to get the scoop on some, I don't know, some abuses of the patients or something, and you get in, and the asylum has basically been locked down, and the inmates are running free, and they're pretty disturbing. And then there's this one guy in particular who keeps coming after you. And why it's scary is because they don't give you any weapons. There's no healing items, there's no way to fight back. All you have is your camcorder, which there are sequences where it'll be pitch black and you have to use the night vision on the camcorder to see what's going on. And a simplified way to describe the game would be hide and seek. You're trying to navigate through this mental hospital. There's this whole section underneath, clearly inspired by Resident Evil. There's like a government lab underneath the hospital. And you're just trying to avoid everybody and try to get out. Now, these people chase you. They can hear the sounds you make. So you'll have to like hide under a bed or in a locker or something like that until they leave the room. So the fact that you are defenseless the whole time, I mean, even the camera they give you, like I said, it's really only has the one use for creating light and darkened spaces. There are very tense moments where the guy hears you, he runs into the room, you're hiding, but he doesn't just leave right away. He starts looking around at different things, and you have to hope he doesn't check the area you're hiding. Now, Resident Evil 2, the remake, actually did have a section that was kind of like that. You're playing as Sherry Birkin in the orphanage, and you're running from the police chief who is going to kill you. And again, you're given no weapons. You're just supposed to hide. It doesn't have the same impact. One, it's a short sequence. there's really only one way it can play out. Or there's actually another way. If you watch some of the speed runs on this, it's incredible what these people have figured out for that sequence. But even then, the murderous police chief, obviously you don't want to get caught as the little girl, but there's no kind of honestly, I feel like that would be scarier if it was just a zombie, because there's no way to reason with the zombie. Potentially, with a human, you could talk your way out of being killed immediately or something, but a zombie doesn't care. It's just going to keep coming to eat you until you're dead. I do think Resident Evil does zombies right by having them slow moving. I know a lot of people prefer the fast moving zombies, and okay, so the Resident Evil zombies, they're not actually zombies. They're humans that have been mutated into like a zombie-like state. They aren't actually undead though, as far as I know. But slow-moving zombies are the better ones, in my opinion. The fact that you have this force that keeps coming after you no matter what you do. You can run, but they will always catch up with you eventually. They don't tire, and they exist for one purpose. The fast-moving zombies might be great for like movies or action games like Left 4 Dead or something like that. But maybe this is just a personal preference here, but I think the slow-moving zombies are scarier. So Resident Evil has had zombies, it's had werewolves, vampires, a host of different mutated creatures and freaks and fishmen. Something I would like to see in terms of like a villain type for future Resident Evil games would be some kind of reptilian hybrid, kind of looking like the hunters from the Resident Evil franchise, but make them look a little more like lizard-like and actually sort of do a backdoor Dino Crisis reboot. So one of the things that Umbrella Corps was experimenting with was, cloning animals or something, so they're cloning dinosaurs or whatever. These Resident Evil remakes and the newer games have great gameplay, and yeah, an excuse to have more of that and maybe throw some dinosaurs in there. I don't know how you could lose with a combination like that. Or even better, find a way to tie it into the Dead Rising series, but make sure it's Frank West and not Chuck Green. Like in Resident Evil 2, in the police station in one of the jail cells, there's a reporter. I think his name is like Roberto Bertolucci or something. Anyways, he got a tip off that Umbrella was doing some crazy shit, and the police sergeant is actually on the Umbrella payroll, so he had him arrested and detained. So now the guy gets killed by the tyrant, so that's out as an option. But perhaps in a future game, you could have a similar type of character who's trying to expose stuff and have that be Frank West. Capcom has a lot of great properties, and it wouldn't necessarily take a ton of work to have a lot of them sort of tie in together, share a universe, or crossover. Now, if you're going to talk about one of the granddaddies of PS1 horror, Resident Evil 2 and 3, it would be not doing justice to also mention Silent Hill. Now, the first Silent Hill, I know a lot of people say like 2 or I think 4, number 2, I believe, is the better game. And while I do admit that it's a huge improvement in virtually every way, there's something about the first game, that first time where you enter the town and there's fog everywhere and you go down that alley and those weird baby things swarm you and you wake up in the church, and I don't know, for me that was a lot more sort of terror-inducing than Resident Evil was. Resident Evil worked well from the standpoint of there were zombies everywhere. You had tank controls, so navigating around them at the time when we were all still kind of getting used to that style of gameplay, using the tank controls made things really awkward, and like I said, you're managing your ammo and your healing items and everything like that. So it created scares sort of out of a scarcity. You felt like, well, am I going to need this for later? Should I save the ammo? Should I just run through here with a knife, taking out all the zombies, even though it means I'll take a couple hits? Silent Hill, though, was all about the atmosphere. The haunting music, the fog-filled streets of the town where you can hear stuff out there, but you can't see it. So you never really know what's going to pop out of you in front of the fog. And of course, the story in Silent Hill, in my opinion, is much better. Harry Mason trying to find his missing daughter in this weird-ass town is a lot creepier than we're in a mansion or we're in a city and everything's going to hell and we need to fight our way out. Silent Hill also did have, in my opinion, ultimately a better movie track record. The first movie I absolutely love. I think it's one of the better examples of a video game adaptation in a film. And I think it's a cool story, and even if I wasn't familiar with the game, I think I'd probably really like the movie. Now, the second one, there were a lot of problems with. Okay, so apparently the guy who wrote and directed the first one, he was involved in a drunk driving accident and he did a number of years in prison. So work on a second film was delayed. And then I think they eventually got some other guy to do it. And it wasn't the same, obviously, because the original director had like a vision for what sequels would look like. And unfortunately, I don't think it did well enough that they'll make any more Silent Hill movies. But perhaps with the a lot of the upcoming games and the remakes and stuff, maybe there will be an increased demand for more Silent Hill cross-media. I did not see the Resident Evil show. I saw the trailers. It looked awful. I feel sad that I think that's one of Lance Riddick's last on-screen roles. It looks bad. It looks like that Walking Dead show for teens. What is it? Walking Dead: The Next Generation or something. The world outside, where it's like 4 teens and they have to go explore the world outside of one of the Walking Dead communities. I think that if they were to take another shot at a Resident Evil show, at least a live-action one, I would love to see an Umbrella-focused prequel series. Maybe they can kind of jump through time, show us how all the 3 architects of Umbrella came together, show us maybe Spencer's trip to the village and how he's influenced there, give us details on, you know, the actual parent company itself and some of the other stuff they're involved with, and basically have the show lead up to the opening moments of would technically be Resident Evil 0. I guess what I'm describing probably now I haven't seen this show, but that show Monarch, which is set in the world of the Godzilla x King Kong stuff. But it deals with the organization Monarch that sort of sprouted up when they first started noticing these Titan beasts. And it takes place over the course of a few decades. And I know both Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt are in it. I don't know if they share any screen time together. But I've heard both performances are good and the show itself is really good. So I think Resident Evil could stand to do something like that. Tie it in, build on the lore, enhance all this stuff, but don't necessarily make it like an action fest. Like every episode there's an outbreak and we gotta put bullets in heads of zombies and stuff like that. Because besides the Umbrella that we know through the games, which is an organization that develops bioweapons to sell to governments all across the world, their cover is actually an organization that develops medical technology and stuff like that. So wondering how much of that medtech is based off of their zombie research and stuff like that. I just think it would be a really fascinating concept for a show. And you can keep that brand, but you can lose a lot of the stuff that's kind of been played out. Like I know everybody thinks zombies when they hear Resident Evil, but it's time to move on. I have also heard a rumor, though, that we might be going from the Ganados back to zombies. As I've heard after the Resident Evil 4 remake, the next game that they're going to be looking to remake is Resident Evil Code Veronica. And I think that's just because it didn't get a huge release. It came out on the Dreamcast originally. I know that they released it on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, but it definitely is kind of like the middle child game. It gets overlooked a lot. I think part of the reason for that is like the ultimate villain, the boss of the game. I think it's just stupid, the motivations and everything about it. It does have that classic RE gameplay, and there are some really cool moments, like the sort of the beginning of the game. But at least like in RE4 and RE5 and I assume RE6, there's no AI controlled useless person you have to bail out of trouble every 5 minutes. So presumably after they've done the Code Veronica remake, they might then be looking forward to remake Resident Evil 5. And if you guys have heard anything about that stupid IGN article, apparently that's not possible. They're going to need to completely rewrite the game because it has black people in it, and sometimes you have to kill them. Even though you're in Africa and there are a lot of black people there. The article is just dumb. It seems like the guy didn't actually, or the woman, I don't remember who wrote the article. It seems like the author hasn't really played the game, maybe just watched some gameplay footage or some cutscenes on YouTube, because I did not get any of what that person was saying, and it seems like a lot of people feel the same way I do, that it's just kind of ridiculous, just forcing your own ideas and your own worldview into something which it doesn't really apply. I liked RE5 though. Like I said, aside from the co-op aspects, I like the new character they introduced, Sheva Alomar. Like I said, I would like to see more of her. I thought she was pretty cool in this game. I like the nation or town of Kajuju. It's a different setting, very different looking than the previous 4 games. Appears to be a little more open like RE4, but again, that's just cleverly disguised walls and ceilings that they'll use like a skybox to replace. And again, for Resident Evil 9, the rumor is open world. The only way that I can see that actually working well is if they essentially made it into a Metroidvania, in the sense that, you progress, you get new abilities, powers, whatever, and then you backtrack to past areas, and then you can open up new branches, new paths to gain access to new areas or weapons or bosses or whatever. I know when you hear Metroidvania, you typically think 2D side-scrolling, but Metroid Prime, that franchise, but especially that first one on GameCube, is a great example of a Metroidvania game done well in 3D. I mean, maybe they could give you the option to tackle certain areas in kind of whichever order you choose, but eventually there would be a need to have to backtrack and explore other areas. I find that one of the best aspects of those types of games, Metroidvanias, or however you want to classify them, it's cool to revisit the past areas and see how your new move set or whatever impacts what's going on there. And I feel like if you're going to be trying something new with the franchise, maybe a different style of gameplay, taking it in a little bit of a different direction, you should also do the same thing with the movies. Like I said, I actually enjoyed Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. I know a lot of people didn't. I know it performed poorly, and there's not going to be a follow-up to that film. I do think what they should do is they should kind of reboot the franchise, but stick to directly adapting each game. Like, the second Resident Evil movie should basically be the second game. Obviously, you're going to need to change elements of it to make it work better narratively as a film than a game. But like the one we got was, like I mentioned, a kind of a hybrid between RE2 and Part 3. Um, what I'm suggesting is those would be separate movies. Like Resident Evil 3 would be about the third game. I mean, obviously, there'd be some numbering issues because there is a Resident Evil 0, which directly sets up Resident Evil 1. But maybe they could sort of combine that or something. I just think they have such a great concept, such a great storyline idea. You've got some wonderful characters, and they should just take advantage of all the work that they've put in over the decades. At least that way, it would be easy to tell which movie is which. Those Mila Jovovich movies, the fourth, fifth, and sixth ones, they blur together to me because there's nothing really distinctive in each one. Like, each one usually has one or two really cool scenes, but it's not like the first one that really kind of stood out, or the second one. Like I said, I have a personal connection to, so I enjoy that one a lot. But it's also adapting two of the better games in the series, so that's a big plus for it. But yeah, just you've crafted such a rich world that it's a shame, Capcom, that they're not doing more with it. The last thing, as a Resident Evil fan, that I want to see is another mediocre or subpar spin-off movie or TV show. And those animated movies were actually good, and like I said, apparently they are into continuity. So what they need to do is to promote those more. Maybe give away a copy as a free download when you buy the new Resident Evil game to help you get up to speed, or just to give you some background on what these characters are doing right before the events of the current game. I just feel like it's a wasted opportunity because these things are direct to DVD. I didn't even know some of them were out until after they'd been out for a while, so there's not a lot of good promotion for them. Resident Evil itself doesn't really seem to get a lot of promotion. I mean, it's a big deal every time a new game comes out, and they try to make it a big deal every time a new film comes out. But I, for the life of me, can't recall ever seeing a ton of Resident Evil merch. Like hats, or I mean, maybe McFarlane Toys did some figures from Resident Evil 2. That kind of sounds familiar. But I mean, you look at all other major game properties right now, and they all have uh, backpack hanger keychain things and T-shirts and like everything. And Resident Evil is just chugging along, putting out games and very little else. Although there is something to be said about not diluting the brand by overproducing, like we've seen Disney do with the Star Wars and the Marvel Comics brands, where you put yourself in a position where by doing so much, you've actually cheapened the value of it. The magic of Star Wars is gone because there's way too much content for it. I think the live-action Resident Evil films were handled by Sony Screen Gems or something like that. Might be a good idea to see them take that franchise over to another studio and see what they could do with it. I'm thinking specifically Paramount or Warner Brothers. Both of them have large distribution networks, so whether you want to do a film, a TV, comic book, video game, whatever, like I'm not video game, Capcom already does those, but it's a way that they could sort of spread the brand further, and as long as they maintain some kind of quality control, like I don't know if the franchise has like a singular sort of guiding voice, or somebody that's kind of keeping track of everything, or if it's by committee, or if it's just something they deal with every time a new game starts development. Basically, they kind of need to do what they're already sort of doing. They just need to tighten it up a lot more. And finally, I just wanted to touch base a little bit on the Resident Evil comic books. at least the ones released in North America. They came out in like the late 90s, early 2000s. They're published by Wildstorm Comics, which was an imprint of DC Comics and now has been completely folded in. It kind of just provided some background on the first two games, like the Chief Irons, who was actually like a serial killer and who wanted to try to kill Sherry Birkin in the second game. There is a comic that sort of delves into like exactly how twisted he was, like that he was abducting women well before the events of the first and second game. And there were just other little moments like that where there's one where it's after the events of the first game and the STARS team is back at base and they're sort of doing reports for their missions. And these are basically just literally summing up the events of the first game. And of course, being a Wildstorm book, they had a lot of great artists. Wildstorm was great at scouting new talent. And I believe it was some of the earlier interior comic work for Lee Bermeo. I know there is Resident Evil manga out there. I've seen like screenshots of some of the pages. I have not read it. I don't know anything about it. If anybody watching this happens to have read it and can fill me in a little bit on whether it's something that's worth reading and whether it builds on the lore or is just more sort of character development. I think it was Chris and I don't know who else was in the story. So yeah, that's basically it for this review of Resident Evil 3 Remake. Kind of got off the rails there, like I said. I ended up wanting to talk about more stuff than just this game. Just to reiterate, I liked the game. I liked it so much that I got the Japanese version and I played that after the American version just so I could double dip and use the achievements as an excuse to do more playthroughs. I mean, to me, that's the sign of a good video game. That I did, counting both the Japanese and the wider release versions, I've probably done about 10, 11 playthroughs of this game. And I've enjoyed it every single time.
Shit.
This has definitely been the longest video to date that I've made. I didn't start off that way. I just wanted to talk about the game. And then I started thinking about it, and then I decided to use my Inferno S-rank playthrough as the sort of B-roll or something for you guys to watch while I'm doing verbal diarrhea here. So yeah, I guess to sum it up, Resident Evil good, Remake good, movies need work. Yeah, so thank you so much if you're actually still watching and or listening to this video at this point.
All right.
Like I said, I've never tried anything this long before. Any kind of feedback you guys can give me would be very appreciated to let me know whether this is something that you want to see or if I should stick to shorter videos or potentially break a longer video up into like 2 or 3 parts. So your feedback is both wanted and appreciated. Now, there's still a little bit more time in this video, so I'm just going to let it play out normally for the rest of the way. You can feel free to watch it or not. This is basically most of the game that you've seen here. There's maybe another 10 to 12 minutes after this. I run through... you have to make like the antidote, you have to get the 2 reagents, make the antidote, and then you face off against the ultimate form of... actually, no, before that you fight Nemesis in the acid pit, and then you face off the final form of Nemesis, where you have to use that giant laser gun to blow him open. And yeah, so keep watching if you want. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back and join me for the next video. Bye.
Override complete.
I might be able to use this to synthesize the vaccine. This must be what powers it. Okay. This looks like it might be used in vaccine development.
To begin vaccine synthesis, place the materials in the chamber.
What in God's name is this place?
Jill, is that you?
have to get that vaccine back.
Opening compartment.
Now we're